This is BBC News, the headlines. A massive Russian aerial bombardment on Ukraine killed at least 4 people overnight, including a 12-year-old girl, and injured dozens more. President Zelensky called it a vile attack and said most of the deaths occurred in Kyiv. In the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has told the BBC that the Reform Party's migrant plans are racist and immoral. He was speaking on the first day of Labour's party conference. In Moldova, a crucial parliamentary election is underway. The president there has warned the country's future is in peril.
For your winners of the 2025
And the victorious England women's rugby team are celebrating with fans at an event in London this afternoon. It comes after a thrilling World Cup win against Canada.
Now on BBC News, join our AI Decoded team as we unpack, explore and take a deep dive into the world of artificial intelligence.
We're living through an information Armageddon.
The kind of AI that we're designing is really perfect for an authoritarian takeover. It is very authoritarian, code is what it does and you cannot negotiate, and it's based on surveillance.
Where is the etiquette? If we are going to just have surveillance technology everywhere and everyone's wearing it, do I have a right to say no?
Can I just for the record suggest that AI Decoded, for full objectivity, should always have a human presenter, Stephanie, on salary with a justifiably long contract, just in case there are any bosses listening. Can we do that?
Are you French, Christian? Is that what this is about? It's about securing your job against whatever technological improvements happen, because we know how that story ends.
I'm going to take that as a vote of confidence, Stephanie, and leave it at that. It's time for AI Decoded. With me on the programme this week, AI expert Dr. Stephanie Hare, author of Technology is Not Neutral, the BBC's AI correspondent Mark Chesak. Priya Lakhani is overseas this week, so sitting in for her, Carissa Valise from the Institute of AI and Ethics at Oxford University. She wrote the book Privacy is Power. Welcome to you all. We have an action-packed programme for you this week, and I want to start with the main event of the week, the UN General Assembly in New York, where AI this week was officially added to the list of global challenges. The UN says it is putting together a global AI forum. The case for this new expert panel was made in New York by the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Ressa.
We're living through an information Armageddon, where lies spread 6 times faster than facts on social media. That's a 2018 MIT study. It is so much worse today with generative AI. And the 3 sentences I've said over and over since 2016, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we don't have a shared reality. We can't begin to solve any problems, let alone the existential ones you heard from the speakers before me. We cannot have journalism, we cannot have electoral integrity, we cannot have democracy. This is manipulation of human behavior at the cellular levels of our countries. Algorithms reward outrage over empathy, spreading fear, anger, and hate, pumping us full of toxic sludge. We urge your governments to establish clear international boundaries to prevent universally unacceptable risks for AI, at the very least define what AI should never be allowed to do.
Okay, let's take some of those points that Maria Ressa made in that speech. Stephanie, she calls for an end to big tech impunity through global accountability. We need binding standards and limits, she says. How do you go about that?
Well, First, you'd have to get countries to sign up to that. And again, we need to look at the history of social media companies to see how poorly that has worked so far. Some countries, such as France and New Zealand, for instance, got together and have been working to take down very violent content whenever there's like a mass shooting, for instance. They still haven't gotten the global rules on this. And I think this is part of the problem is we're having two conflicting tensions, if you will. On the one hand, everybody would like to see AI for good. Nobody wants AI to hurt humanity. On the other hand, there's a commercial national security imperative here. You've got the United States led by President Donald Trump and China led by President Xi Jinping in competition. Everybody else is kind of left in the dust and is like getting the scraps and having it imposed on them as well.
As you sort of explore and go further into this, you're going to really struggle, aren't you, to hold a sort of loose coalition of signatories together?
I mean, we have to remember it was not that long ago that Vice President J.D. Vance told the Munich Security Conference, the United States will dominate AI. Does that sound like someone who wants to take a multilateral approach to AI regulation?
Because ultimately, Carissa, profit wins.
Yes, but something to bear in mind is that citizens are tired of being exploited by big tech. And so there is a business opportunity in offering tech that is better designed, that protects privacy, that protects security. And so partly we need innovation. And if you look at the history of regulation and corporations, sometimes it is one corporation doing a better job than the others that rises the standards for everyone. And it's governments who follow the corporation and regulate after the fact, not before the fact. So this is a time for innovators to really think about democracy and what kind of technology supports democracy and doesn't undermine it.
Yeah, she says somewhere in that speech, information integrity is the mother of all battles. What do you think she means by that?
I think she means that if you don't have trustworthy information, you cannot have a rational conversations with citizens because you don't have a common reality. If you don't know who to trust, you don't know how to react. Essentially, it undermines your agency because in order to make decisions that are rational, to vote appropriately, to make decisions about your house, your company, how you navigate the world, you need to have a good sense of what's going on. And if there's disinformation all the time and you don't know what's going on, then you can't have the pillars of democracy that it basically is based on trust and citizenship.
What she's proposing, Mark, is an alternative infrastructure. That's the term she used to what we have right now. She says maybe we should have a matrix or a global federation of trusted news organizations, which I have to say, I'm not really clear where she's going with that.
I mean, that's a conversation that's going on in news organizations and media organizations across the planet anyway, conversations about trust. Well, if you look at a lot of studies and a lot of surveys that are being done around public attitudes towards AI, quite a few of them are very, very negative. And until those attitudes change, until those attitudes shift, the technology is always going to have problems. And the people that want to introduce these technologies, whether it's commercial interests, whether it's governments, they're going to find that people are resistant to the tech unless they can convince them that it is something that they can trust.
We've already touched on it, Stephanie, but obviously it's incumbent on the United States and China to lead on this. Do you think there is common ground between the two main governments? What could they possibly agree on? And ultimately, could they trust each other to implement what they agree on? Because that, for me, is the big sticking point.
I always think like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In this case, what do the United States and China both consider to be a mutual threat or a mutual problem? So perhaps if we have an invasion from outer space, maybe. But in all fairness, I actually
could be mutual extinction.
It could. And we're on that way with climate change anyhow. Right now, it's two big giant countries and a couple of big giant companies that are largely dominating this space. What we need are smaller players. DeepSeek was one, Mistral another. I know it's ironic to call a multi-billion-dollar company a small player, but when you're talking against what we're talking about here, Mistral is still not a total giant yet. That might be a way forward.
Just a final thought on this, Carissa. How do you get the international organizations, multilateral organizations, to agree a path forward if there is always that threat, that stick that's being wielded by the United States?
It has to be a combination of things. It cannot just be regulation because that's not going to work. So like Stephanie said, if we had an alternative, and we really need to rethink how we do AI, following what the US is doing is not the tactic, because if you're following, you're behind and you're doing the same thing. So if we could actually do AI, for example, that doesn't use so much data, that doesn't use so much compute, that is not based on surveillance. Because at the moment, the kind of AI that we're designing is really perfect for an authoritarian takeover. It is very authoritarian. Code is what it does, and you cannot negotiate, and it's based on surveillance. And we need something different. At the beginning, you said something that I think is also important. Maybe we want areas of life in which we don't want AI. We keep the analog world because it's safer.
You think that's possible? You think that is possible in this advancing ecosphere of AI for us to stand outside it?
Absolutely, not outside it, but beside it, to have a backup in analog. And not only is it possible, if you look at the best institutions of security, they always have an analog backup, because the moment you depend on AI, you depend on a company that you don't control and an algorithm that is unreliable. And that is risky.
Okay, well, let's move on. Here's the rest of the main news this week. Reuters report that NVIDIA will invest up to $100 billion in OpenAI and supply it with the advanced data center chips it will require. It's a tie-up between two of the highest profile players in the global AI race. Those of you alarmed at the advance of Big Brother will not like this. The Times claims that some US firms are using generative AI to feed in the names of their employees in order to monitor their online activity and their social media accounts. We'll get into that shortly. And some of you will have seen this week's Meta launch of their new AI smart glasses, the latest in smartwear technology. The New York Times has a rather amusing write-up of the launch, which for Mark Zuckerberg did not go according to plan. I'll show you that a little later on. Comedy gold. Let me pick up on that first story, though, Mark, with you. NVIDIA's investment in OpenAI, $100 billion to support OpenAI with the chips for its data center, which for me, I think really underscores the overlapping interests of the tech giants. Does it give them, do you think, these two companies an unfair advantage over the competition?
That's a difficult one to say, but I think what this does talk to is it talks to that argument about sort of domination of the space, these superpowers trying to dominate the space, that you've got two American companies here effectively combining forces to consolidate power. And it's interesting that it's happening at a time where we're seeing the Chinese starting to heavily develop and heavily invest in domestic chip production, domestic science and technology development, stuff that they're making. Basically, what we would call sovereign AI in the UK is domestic Chinese technology that can rival the technology that's coming out of the United States. So I think this is about a consolidation of power when they're seeing a rival power trying to challenge them. And we knew that China was going to do this. It's a stated aim of the Chinese government that they're going to do this, but they really seem to be amping up and turning up the dial on the development of that technology so that they aren't reliant on US tech.
Yeah, because in many ways, Stephanie, there's a symbiotic relationship already between these companies. So the convergence of hardware and software was perhaps inevitable.
Yeah, I was actually trying to draw it out before preparing for the show. You've got OpenAI, which already has, I think, a $13 billion stake from Microsoft. Right, so that's already a massive, giant investment. And then NVIDIA has just been on a shopping spree all over town. They just put $5 billion towards Intel. Now they're putting this huge stake with OpenAI. But when you look at the deal, it actually looks like a self-dealing thing. If I give you money so that you buy my stuff, is that okay? It feels anti-competitive to me. Like nobody else can get a look in. And in any other US administration, I think you would be seeing an investigation on anti-competition grounds. In this administration, President Trump was very clear. He wants to give the United States tech companies pretty much free rein to go and dominate. So it's not going to be looked at, I think.
Just on the technology, Stephanie, because I know you're really hot on this. This is money for 10 gigawatts of AI data centers. And the first gigawatt of that will come online sometime in the second half of 2026. What does that look like? Because I've no idea how to visualize that.
I think it's the equivalent of powering 10 million American homes. It's massive.
For
I mean,
1 gigawatt
it's
or
both
for 10
massive
gigawatts?
for
Sorry.
the whole thing.
Okay.
And that's massive. And America's 330 million people, so it's both massive and also not a lot if you were thinking of it just in those terms. But you have to think about it is in terms of the electricity grid within the United States, the water consumption, all of this. We've already been seeing people talking about getting their electricity bills going through the roof, towns complaining about what's happening to water. You need to look at the fact that all these data centers are being built in states where there are droughts and very little rain. So how they're going to square the circle, I'm not sure. And that's something that we'll want to really track is all of these investment promises are promises. Doesn't mean it's a done deal.
I hate it when you tell me that, though, because I'm on a guilt trip every time I open ChatGPT. I'm sort of bottle of water sinking through the table. I don't know. It's horrific.
With NVIDIA in 5 years, did they actually build those data centers? They said they would. But
I'm quite abstemious when I use ChatGPT, and it's only because of you. It's because of you. You make me feel guilty. Just on this ethics thing, Carissa. I mean, I don't know much about what goes on in the inner workings of NVIDIA, but I do know they make different grades of chips, and there are really serious chips that go into defense, aerospace, that sort of thing. So on the ethics side of things, it stands to reason, does it not, that they would channel the best chips towards their closest partners?
Yeah, that's true. And it makes us incredibly dependent on a company, and not only a company, just really a handful of men with very high stakes financially, and their interests are not necessarily our interests. And that makes it really problematic. So one of the alternatives that I think we should take much more seriously is people having their own servers. So you don't actually need to use ChatGPT. You could have, if you're a university, if you're a government, if you're a company, you could have a large language model design based on something like DeepSeek or like Luma from Proton, and have your own server and host it yourself in your house or in your company. And that makes us much more independent and much more autonomous.
I think just touching on that as well. Just touching on that as well. A long time ago, somebody said to me, an engineer once said to me, he said, if you think about cloud computing in a slightly different way, you know, terming the term cloud computing, it kind of sounds a bit amorphous and sounds kind of fun. But how about think about cloud computing this way? Cloud computing is somebody else's computer. So you're storing stuff, you're processing data on somebody else's computer. And when you have that relationship with the term, I think it changes how you think about how you use that technology.
It's a good thought. Yeah, very good thought. I want to talk about the Times story about snooping. It's got me really hot under the collar, this. I went back and I read the story in full, and the source for this story is the chief executive of the Society for Human Resource Management in the United States, a guy called Johnny C. Taylor Jr., who told the Times that in a recent meeting with dozens of Fortune 200 companies, the chief HR officers told him that they were actively and increasingly monitoring employees' activity. I can't think, Carissa, of a more chilling thing than that when it comes to freedom of speech.
There's so much to say about this, from AI being so inaccurate and just making assumptions and correlations and not being precise at all, to how it erodes the distinction between the private and the public. So it's not only what people post online. For example, people may not be aware that all of your conversations with ChatGPT are being stored, and that in theory, you could have a freedom of information request on them. And how AI makes it so easy to surveil. So if you go back to East Germany, you had to hire a guy to follow people and listen to the conversations. And that was incredibly expensive. So you could only more or less surveil about a third of the population. But today, if you have AI going through every keylog, not only what you write and what you publish, but what you write and then not publish, you erase it before you click send. I mean, everything is being recorded. Then your surveillance capabilities become truly the stuff of a nightmare.
Well, I get that. But then when it sort of hands it on to the employer, Mark, they're looking to see whether their employees are engaging in online activity that is inconsistent with their values, statements that are racist or misogynistic. I mean, can you make a case for that? Can you make a case for employees giving over their information to their employer, maybe unwillingly?
No,
This is I mean, and this is a sort of a different spin on the social media story, which is people's social media activity being monitored by their employer, or somebody driving around in a van with a company's name on the side of it. They get into a little bit of a traffic argument with somebody on the road. It's being filmed. The next thing you know, the person driving that van is getting a whole heap of hate online and has lost their job. It's another spin on that kind of argument. Are you representative of your employer with through your online activity? If you are identifiable, in some cases, if you're identifiable, I suppose some people would argue, yes, you are a representative of them. Other people would argue that it is an infringement of your free speech. I think what it does make it clear to people is be aware that what you're saying online and the conversations that you're having online and who you're saying it to and how you're saying it, they could reflect on you, and they could reflect badly on you, and there may be consequences to what you say online.
What's interesting about this story is it sort of comes right in the heat of the row surrounding Jimmy Kimmel, Stephanie. And there's been such a backlash this past week over the suspension of him and the perceived attack on free speech. But I think what might interest a lot of our viewers is that those who face disciplinary action in the United States commonly, like him, have gone to the First Amendment. But apparently the First Amendment does not apply to non-governmental employers. Who knew? Private companies can discipline or sack workers for speech that they don't like without violating the First Amendment, which honestly, Stephanie, I can't understand.
Well, it becomes like a mutually assured destruction thing as well, because, right now there's a Republican president and domination in Congress, so they might want to persecute so-called liberals, but that could then change in a few years' time. So if you're a Republican, you might be thinking, let's be really careful, because in 3 years' time, I could be the one getting sacked, right? And I think that's how the United States had kind of been operating for a long time. All Americans know that the First Amendment only protects you from your free speech being censored by the state. Between you and your employer is a totally different ball of wax. What's interesting here, though, particularly in the case of Jimmy Kimmel, but also everybody else, frankly, is that you're getting companies who are acting because they're almost like proxy agents for the government. So when you have the president or the vice president who actually said, call people's employers and tell them what they're saying online, like basically narc on them, that shocked, I think, a lot of Americans across the spectrum.
Shall we talk about AI-powered smart glasses? Although actually it might not be entirely removed from what we're just discussing, because there's been this collaboration between Meta and Ray-Ban, and it's been there for some time. The previous models, some of you might have tried in the airport. You can live stream through them. You can film something. You can issue voice commands. I think you can even do real-time translations, that kind of thing. Well, the latest model includes a built-in augmented reality, and it's controlled via a wristband that detects electrical impulses from your arm. So there's now a gesture-based interaction. That's what it says on the box anyway. Have you tried these, Mark? Or have you tried the forerunner to these?
I've tried some technology like this out in the past. I've got a call in with Meta to actually go and try the technology out. I'm quite keen to see what it's like. I like the idea of the neural band, the band that you wear on the wrist, and you can even manage to tap out text using it. It'll give you a display inside the glasses, and you'll be able to select words and text people. Mark Zuckerberg tried to demonstrate
I can type wrongly virtually.
Yeah, exactly. Mark Zuckerberg tried to demonstrate it by sending a surreptitious text message to somebody.
Yeah. Has anyone seen Mark Zuckerberg's live demo of these glasses?
Oh, it's brilliant. It is
pure comedy gold, this. So he tries on stage to use them to answer a call.
Well, let's see what happened there.
And it goes horribly wrong.
That's too bad. I don't know what happened. Maybe Buzz can try calling me again. All right. Well, I got a missed video call. Okay, there's the actual video call. All right. I'm just going to pick that up with my neural band. This is, it happens.
That, for me, is every one of us that's ever used tech. It warms my heart, Mark, that he can get it so wrong.
Watching that video of Zuckerberg, doing that presentation, I wonder what the conversation was like afterwards. I wonder if somebody if somebody got fired. And the display inside the glasses, that is something that a lot of people have been waiting for because of the potential that it has. You know, you can do a lot of different stuff with that tech. You could use it to direct you to fix something. You could use it to give you your maps in a head-up display in your glasses. Me personally, I'm terrible with remembering people's names. I would love to have a display that told me who I was speaking to when they appeared. Imagine getting somebody's social feeds or something like that, and that talks to lots of sort of issues of privacy, which I think a lot of people are quite worried about.
Yes, I'm going to get to that with Carissa, but Stephanie and Carissa won't understand this, Mark, but I'm suspicious that they're rewiring the human male brain because, as you know, we can only do one thing at once.
We're very
we can't
simple
do two things at the same time. But anyway, let's get to the privacy stuff, Carissa. I mean, there's all sorts in this, isn't there? Privacy, legal considerations. You could have images stolen, videos of employees recorded. We're back to that privacy thing again, where you can't say anything freely.
Yeah, and the question of consent is a huge problem because, okay, another person is using the glasses. I want nothing to do with them, but I might be in their vision. And again, to connect it with the previous story, because they are connected. Part of what makes a liberal democracy is separation of spheres, that you can be a different person and have a different environment in your work than from your neighbors and from your family. And suddenly with tech, everything is coming together such that everything you do could have an impact on how the government treats you and how the algorithms are judging you and categorizing you and how your employee is treating you and whether you get a job or a loan or an apartment.
Where is the etiquette? If we are going to just have surveillance technology everywhere and everyone's wearing it, you know, do I have a right to say no? So if I invite a bunch of people over to my house and somebody wants to record our dinner conversation because they happen to be wearing their glasses and they're an influencer and they think it'd be really fun to post it, if the people who don't want to be recorded don't like it, who's right? Like, do they just have to leave the party? If you're in an office situation, you're in a meeting, you're just having a coffee, maybe you're having a really tough day and you're in tears and somebody's filming you. Like, I just think we're not thinking about the world that we're building at all.
It's a good final thought. I feel like we've terrified everyone this week. Maybe next week we need to remind everyone that AI really does have some positive uses. There are so many good things happening out there. I'm going to get Stephen, our producer, to remind us next week why AI is going to change our lives for the good. But that is all ahead. Listen, I just want to say thank you to Stephanie, to Mark and Carissa. Thank you for your time again this week. Remember, all the catalogue of AI Decoded going forward will be there on the BBC YouTube channel. So if you missed a part of the edition this week, do have a look. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Live from London, this is BBC News.
For your winners of the 2025 Women's Rugby World Cup, England!
After a World Cup win against Canada, the England women's rugby team celebrate their success at a party in London.
We just want to thank you so much, from right at the start of the tournament in Sunderland to down here in Twickenham for the final. It's been absolutely amazing, and we just want to thank everybody that's come on board and supported us.
In today's other news, Ukraine comes under a massive and sustained overnight attack by hundreds of Russian drones and missiles. As Labour's party conference gets underway, the Prime Minister renews his attack on Reform UK.
I am here in Liverpool, where Sir Keir Starmer has described Reform's migration policy as racist and says he needs space to deliver on his promise of change.
Hello, I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Welcome to the programme. England have been celebrating their World Cup win in the women's rugby final at a Battersea Power Station party in London.
For your winners of the 2025 Women's Rugby World Cup, England!
And despite the rain, fans turned out to see the captain there, Zoe Aldcroft, and the team lift the trophy again after beating Canada 33-13 in Saturday's final, which was held at Twickenham in front of record crowds. And the captain explained what's so special about this England team.
The big thing is our culture. Like, we are so bonded as a team. Like, we have so many fun experiences. Like, we just enjoy each other's company off the pitch, and I just enjoyed this whole time together, and it really connects us on the pitch as well.
A word for these guys out here.
We just want to thank you so much, from right at the start of the tournament in Sunderland to down here in Twickenham for the final. It's been absolutely amazing, and we just want to thank everybody that's come on board and supported us for the last few weeks and the last 3 years as well, part of our journey.
And we also heard from the England player Ellie Kildunn.
Yeah, it's been incredible. I think it's going to be weeks to remember, months to remember. Yeah, it's something that you couldn't imagine. We couldn't have expected it to go the way that it did. Obviously, the win is the top thing, the main thing, but you know, the crowds that have come throughout the whole tournament and supporters and being with us on this journey has blown me away, and long we carry that on as well.
Just an estimate, how much sleep did the team get last night?
You know, it wasn't that bad, to be fair. I think I got a good 6 or 7 hours. Yeah, I mean, you don't celebrate for just one night only, so you got to pace yourself.
And it's our reporter Matt down there asking the questions, and he also spoke to Sarah Byrne about a social media post that she shared back in July, where she talked about not feeling like she'd fit in growing up because of her build and her strength, and how things have changed now.
I know you're trying to make me cry, so I'll try not to cry. But yeah, for me, it's massive. I want girls to know that, you know, I really felt the pressure growing up, and I know my sisters and there's people in my family struggled with eating disorders, and I don't want anyone to grow up in a world where they feel like they can't fit in. Like, especially members in my family are part of SCN, autism. Like, I would never change them for the world, but I would change the world for them. So that's what I'm trying to do, change the world. I'm gonna cry.
Now, there are celebrations continuing there in London, no doubt. Next, we're going to head to Ukraine. President Zelensky has condemned an overnight Russian attack, which lasted more than 12 hours, and he called it vile and said Moscow wanted to keep on fighting and killing. Well, we have pictures of the emergency services in Kyiv. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia launched almost 600 drones and 48 missiles in its latest attack, killing 4 people, injuring dozens and damaging civilian infrastructure as well. Russia says it hit military targets during the attack. Here's our Ukraine correspondent, James Waterhouse.
For Ukrainians, Russia's aerial bombardments can be as random as they are routine. This was the northeastern city of Sumy in the small hours, and Odessa in the south, as hundreds of Russian drones swarmed the skies for 12 hours. The capital wasn't spared either, as fire crews undertook the familiar task of battling flames and preserving life. It's only when the sirens stop and the sun rises does the damage become apparent.
This is a very pronounced impact zone. It's clear a missile has been launched at the heart of a residential estate. And you're looking at the difference between Kyiv and Moscow. Russia can just keep manufacturing hundreds of drones and missiles, and Ukraine can't. It's reliant on its Western friends to try and defend itself, and at the moment, it's struggling.
I woke up at 6 from the huge explosion, says Thaisa, and saw a huge flash. I fell down from the bed and rushed to the shelter. The force of the blast blew out almost every window, hollowing out homes. These attacks are designed to impact morale.
Everyone has to stay human. It's been a 4th year of the war. It's time to stop it.
Ukrainian officials use these attacks to urge the West to act faster. The Kremlin has once again claimed it was targeting military sites.
It's one more example of genocide of Russian Federation against Ukraine, against capital of Ukraine, to kill peaceful people, to destroy peaceful districts in our hometown.
For those physically unscathed, the seemingly impossible task of picking up the pieces begins. For some time, this has almost been the normal for Ukrainians, although few would call it that.
And a little earlier, I caught up with James for the latest.
People here are saying it was around 6 o'clock that the blast happened, and you can only imagine what it would have been like. From where we were in a more central part of Kyiv, you can hear loud bangs from as far as 5 to 10 kilometres away, such as the force generated from missiles and drones. They make the windows rattle. Here, behind me, you can see where the missile slammed into a residential block. And in all of the apartment buildings around, every window has been blown through. Such has been the concentration of force. And so there are people looking out, wondering what to do next. They are sweeping up glass. But this is an exercise that officials and emergency teams are well exercised in. They have cleaned up incredibly quickly, and it's something they've always tried to do throughout this war. They've tried to pick up the pieces as quickly as possible and restore normality as quickly as possible. But of course, you know, Kyiv, like so many other Ukrainian cities, has to live with that constant aerial threat, despite being, you know, relatively far from the front lines.
And James, in your report there, you touched on the fact that Russia can create these weapons and send them over. Ukraine depends on more help from allies. Just give us a sense of the relative military strength and tactics on both sides right now.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about the aerial battle, we are seeing Ukraine increase its domestic manufacture of drones. It's also developing a new long-range missile, which it hopes to launch deeper inside Russia. Crucially, it would need the permission of the United States, which it does on other Western weaponry. But the problem is that it just doesn't have the cash to make it on a large enough scale. Whereas with Russia, a country still very much on a war footing, it is able to steer its economy through making large-scale weaponry on such a broad scale. So this is why you see President Zelensky continue his political effort in securing partnership deals when it comes to weapons manufacturing. We're seeing it happen in Denmark, but what Ukraine desperately wants is the US to free up more weaponry. President Zelensky said a defense battery, this missile battery, this Patriot system, one arrived from Israel, which is a turn of events because Israel's obviously, well, it has been taken a neutral stance in this war, but it's the trickle of weaponry for Ukraine which isn't coming fast enough.
Thanks to James for that. Next, Keir Starmer has called reforms plans to make some migrants reapply for visas racist and immoral. He said reform didn't believe in a tolerant and diverse United Kingdom. Prime Minister also says Labour's battle with reform was a fight for the soul of our future that will affect generations. Nick Eardley reports from Liverpool.
Labour is promising renewal. Renewal for the country, but renewal for Keir Starmer's leadership too. There are questions about his future, his ability to fulfil ambitious policy pledges. But the Prime Minister argues the fight is on for Britain's political future.
We have got the fight of our lives ahead of us because we've got to take on reform, we've got to beat them. And so now is not the time for introspection or navel gazing. There is a fight that we are all in together, and every single member of our party and our movement Actually, everyone who cares about what this country is, whether they vote Labour or otherwise, it's the fight of our lives for who we are as a country.
This man has been branded an enemy. Nigel Farage is ahead in the polls, making many Labour MPs nervous. But his plan to force some people here legally to reapply to stay has been controversial, because tougher rules could mean that some are forced to leave the country.
Do you think it's a racist policy?
Well, I do think that it is a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
And do you think that Reform UK is trying to appeal to racists?
No, I think that there are plenty of people who either vote Reform or are thinking of voting Reform who are frustrated. They had 14 years of failure under the Conservatives. They want us to change things. They may have voted Labour a year ago, and they want the change to come more quickly.
Reform pushed back strongly, saying their plans would ensure migrants contribute to society and that only British people can access welfare.
The Prime Minister has been very keen to talk about Reform UK so far here in Liverpool. Why? Well, part of it is facing up to political reality. Reform are ahead in the polls, which suggests he could win an election. But Keir Starmer also thinks he can win a debate if he frames it as a choice between decency and division.
There is a lot for Labour members to think about here. Is Keir Starmer